The night was heavy with an unnatural silence as journalist Daniel Grayson drove through the desolate countryside. His destination was Black Hollow, an abandoned town that had been wiped off maps decades ago. Legends spoke of a place where people vanished overnight, where no birds sang, and where the air itself carried whispers of the lost. Daniel had spent years chasing the paranormal, but nothing could have prepared him for what lay ahead as he entered the town. His headlights illuminated rows of crumbling houses, their windows shattered, doors hanging off rusted hinges. The clock tower in the center stood frozen at midnight. He parked his car outside what looked like an old diner, its sign faded and unreadable. A chill crawled up his spine as he stepped out. The streetlights flickered despite their apparent disrepair. The atmosphere was suffocating, thick with the weight of something unseen. He took out his camera and started recording. Black Hollow, a town abandoned yet untouched. What happened to its people? And why does it still feel occupied? Faint creaking noise echoed. His eyes darted toward the sound a swing set in a playground, swaying though there was no wind. His fingers tightened around the camera. A shadow moved past the alley between two buildings. "Hello," he called. Out, no answer. He stepped closer, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. The shadow belonged to a man in a suit, his back turned to Daniel. The figure stood unnaturally still. Daniel hesitated before approaching. "Sir, are you?" The man turned. His face was blank. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just smooth, featureless skin. Daniel staggered back, choking on his breath. The figure lifted a hand, and suddenly the air grew dense, pressing against Daniel's chest. He stumbled backward, gasping. When he looked again, the man was gone. Daniel's hands trembled as he lifted his camera, but the footage showed nothing unusual. He exhaled sharply, trying to steady himself. "Hallucination," he muttered, though he knew better. Determined to get more evidence, he walked further into the town. Every building appeared frozen in time. Plates sat untouched on tables. Clothes remained hung on lines, stiff with dust. It was as if the people had simply disappeared in the middle of their routines. His attention snapped to a newspaper lying on a store counter. The headline read, "They are coming. Leave now." The date was from over 50 years ago. A sound like soft humming filled the air. It was faint but growing louder. It came from the church at the end of the street. He hesitated, then moved toward it. The doors groaned open with little effort. Inside, rows of pews faced an altar where a massive, cracked mirror stood. Daniel approached, his reflection staring back. Then it moved. He froze. He hadn't moved, yet his reflection had turned its head slightly. It grinned. His reflection lifted a hand and pointed behind him. Dread coiled in his gut. He turned slowly. The pews were filled. Dozens of faceless figures sat in silence, their heads slightly tilted as if waiting for him to speak. His breath hitched. One by one, they began to stand. The humming grew into a low chant. The walls trembled. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the room. He bolted for the door, shoving it open. As he ran outside, he realized the entire town was awake. Silhouettes filled the streets, emerging from houses, stepping off porches, all turning their eyeless faces toward him. He sprinted to his car, fumbling with the keys. Hands slammed against the windows. The engine roared to life, and he floored the gas. The figures didn't chase him. They simply stood watching as he sped away. The town disappeared in his rearview mirror, but his heart refused to calm. He glanced at his camera. desperate to prove what he had seen. He rewound the footage and pressed play. Blackness. The video had erased itself, his reflection in the rearview mirror shifted. It smiled. The last thing Daniel heard before his car skidded off the road was the whisper of 100 voiceless mouths. Welcome home.